if you're giving out clothing, picture yourself walking into your like local Goodwill and seeing your swag sitting there on the, on the rack selling for a couple of bucks.
In this episode of Investors and Operators, we are speaking again with return guest Liz Weindruch, who is a managing director at Barings on their diversified alternative equity team. Liz, we're going to dive deep into AGMs because I think you've attended a few over the years.
A handful, sure.
All right. Well, it is AGM season. And we want this to be useful for emerging managers in particular, people who are doing their first AGM or even their second and beyond. So here's what we're going to talk about today. And this is a part of the 51 Labs AGM Best Practices Guide. We're going to have content, but we want to make sure, because it is February, that people who are planning their March and April AGMs are getting some content fast. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, AGM mistakes. Second, AGM materials. Third, AGM location. Fourth, AGM agenda, which might include the speakers, who you should and should not include in there. And last, the swag, the ever popular topic and a large line item on the budget, the swag. All right, let's dive in, Liz, with some spicy content around AGM mistakes.
Okay. So it's February. If your AGM is in March or April and you're just now starting to plan things, then you've made a mistake. No, I'm serious in that I think the timing of the AGM is very, very important. And the way that you communicate that timing and when you communicate that timing is also very important. Most LPs this should resonate with everyone, that there's a couple of weeks in October, November, and a couple weeks in maybe March, April, even going into May, where there's just a lot of annual meetings, right? There's, most of them are on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They're during the week, and you end up with a lot of things competing for your time during those time frames too. So, sending out a save the date, planning your, flag in the sand, whatever you want to call it, doing that, not necessarily a year in advance, but I would say 9 to 10 months in advance. I'm getting save the dates for AGMs in October, November last month. So I think that, the biggest mistake you can make is, not doing the right thing around planning and communication, because this ultimately is for your LPs. And so if your LPs are not able to go because they weren't able to plan appropriately, then you've screwed up.
And you were mentioning, like what the rule of 8. We got to remind people 8 times about
I was
something.
going to say, this was something that a guy that I worked with told the team for, years and years and years. And I always rolled my eyes. But to your point, it's the 8 times rule. Tell them in your quarterly letter. Tell them in a separate email that says save the date. Maybe send an Outlook invite. A lot of groups are doing that now too, which I think is great. It holds the time on the calendar. I'm very, very driven by my Outlook calendar. So if it's on the calendar, then it happens. So there are a lot of different ways to do it, but I think the importance of it is to communicate with them as much as you can. So in every way that you can, kind of written, if you've got a quarterly call that you do with your LPs, mention it on that call. Just, communicate on the kind of the timing and the place and all those good things.
You had mentioned that somebody sent out just an email notification that said, take a look at our data room to find the date.
Yeah, I would say like the worst way to do it is most GPs at this point in time are sending out all of their communications via uploading to a data room, which I think that's great. Like, it's secure. It allows for us to go and pull them down. It's quarterly reports, it's partners capital statements. Everything I need related to that GP is in that data room. I know I can log in and find it. But if you've decided that's how you want to communicate the time and the place of the AGM by uploading a PDF to your data room and then sending the generic tickler out to your LPs, you got to do other things too. Like, that to me is probably the worst. If you're going to do just one thing and that's it, that's the worst thing to do.
There we go. So I think the macro mistake is communication.
Yes. Yes.
or
exactly.
or lack thereof.
Right.
And I think we can get a little bit more detailed as we go through some of the other topics here. So let's dive into the materials.
Yes.
When you're sitting in the audience, what are some of the best materials that you have seen? What is the what kind of goes into it? How do you break it down? And also, what do you not like in the materials that you're being presented with?
Sure. So I think that starting out with a firm sort of overview and update, with updates on the team, updates on deployment, and it's all going to depend on if you've got one fund or if you have 10 funds, right? Like it's gonna the level of detail you go into is going to depend on that. But like let's just say that you spend some time on the team, you do a high level sort of overview of where you are in the life cycle of your current fund. Um, and that sort of intro section kind of sets the stage for then a deeper dive portfolio review. I do also think that you need a macro section. So if you're focused on certain themes or sectors, like let's say you're focused on healthcare and consumer and software, to have sort of deep dives on what's going on within your sectors, like what are you nervous about? What are you excited about? If our software investors aren't talking about the, apocalypse that happened last week, then like, you've got to keep it very current and very up to date with sort of what's going on in the macro and then how that translates into your portfolio too, right? So don't just talk about larger trends. Say, here's the trend and here's how it's showing up in, company ABC. I think that after that, a deeper dive into each portfolio company, obviously, if time allows, if you've got too many, then focus on the value drivers. Where you focus on, hey, here's what the business is. As a reminder, here's what our thesis was going in. Here's what our value creation plan was. Here's how we underwrote returns. Here's what's happened. And here's how our forecasts or projections have or haven't changed. And I think that last piece is what's missing from a lot of annual meetings of like, hey, and I think that a lot of people are worried about maybe being wrong. But there's GPs that I know that'll say, hey, we underwrote the business to do this. We didn't anticipate rates going up. We didn't anticipate all these things happening. We've had to pivot a lot. We've had to make some changes. And now we think it's going to be an extra year and the returns may not be what we forecast, right? Like, so I think that having those sort of like frank, honest conversations helps develop trust between you and your LPs. And so I think don't be afraid to get that out there as you're sort of just being honest and talking about what's going on in the portfolio.
In terms of who is talking during the AGM, what do you like to see? And what also do you think are some of the mistakes people make?
So I don't know. I may be in the minority here. So I've seen it. I've seen it every single way. And I think there's value in hearing from the portfolio company CEOs. So I like hearing from them. I also think there's value in hearing from the kind of the not junior, but the more mid-level people on those respective deal teams. I like to see firms get their kind of more mid-level folks on stage to present these companies. Not because I want to see, people walking on and off the stage, but I think that it just to me shows that you're focused on the development and the kind of increased visibility of the folks who you want to be on that kind of partner career path. And so I think that the big mistake you can make is having the same one, 2, 3 people talking the entire time. I think that there's a nice balance of showcasing operating partners or showcasing portfolio company CEOs or showcasing other folks on the team that are part of the kind of day-to-day value creation plan within that portfolio company.
Okay.
I also think it's a big mistake to and we're sorry, we've gone back to the prior topic. I've been to AGMs where they've just had panels of CEOs and operating partners and haven't told you a thing about what's going on in the portfolio.
So they'll just do a CEO panel about a particular topic in a particular industry
Yes.
or a leadership topic,
Yes. Which is
but
interesting, but, like, it doesn't tell me anything about what's going on in the portfolio.
so people like they just skipped
Yeah.
or they just skimmed over the
Yeah.
actual portfolio
Yes.
company
Yes.
or the portfolio as a whole.
Over the portfolio company. So there might be like a macro, like in the upfront section, they'll do an intro and they'll say, here's where we are in the life cycle of our funds. We're harvesting here, we're deploying here. And now let's have someone come up and let's do a panel with our operating partners and CEOs on AI. By the way, everyone's talking about AI at their annual meetings. But so then they'll do a larger panel, but they won't actually spend time digging into what's going on within the portfolio within each individual company or a handful of the key value drivers.
Interesting. Talk about, more with AI. Did that really start last AGM season during, like, the winter f fall winter of last year?
No, it started well before that, probably at least 2 to 3 years before.
And do
I
you
only know it because it's when I first downloaded Anthropic onto my phone, onto my personal phone.
yeah. Do you Do you still want that as a slide to talk about, hey, here's reality, perception and reality, of what's happening in the portfolio, or is it still a topic to focus on as much?
It's definitely a topic to focus on. Everyone wants to know what you're doing. It's everyone is going to ask about it. I think you've got to put it up front. And I think that there's two ways to talk about it at least. The first is how you're implementing AI at the firm level, and that typically is going to show up in how people are sourcing and doing business development and being more efficient with time and resources as they're assessing deals. But then there's also how it is showing up in the portfolio and where portfolio companies are harnessing it and using it to be better, and also where it could potentially be a threat as well.
I know this is kind of a broad stroke question, but if you had to ballpark, what percent of the AGMs that you have attended do you felt like the tone was open, transparent, and honest, as like, I view you as a partner as opposed to you're my boss, I have to just show the sunshine and rainbows. What part do you feel like, what, this is just truly where we're at, we're doing right, things that we kind of messed up, and here's where we're going.
So these days I pick and choose my spots and which ones that I go to, and so I tend to so I'm gonna
Selection
over
bias.
I'm gonna over index into the higher quality ones, right? Like those are the ones where I feel like I've got a strong partnership with those GPs. It's also and, like, this is a bit off topic, but it's also where we typically tend to have an LPAC role, and so we have a deeper relationship with that GP, and there are also LPAC sessions that are held in advance of AGMs in many instances, and so you've already sort of gotten deeper dive updates, then you go into the AGM, so you just go in feeling smart, and you
Okay,
go in knowing the portfolio and then getting sort of this incremental detail, which is just sort of helpful to your kind of baseline understanding of what's going on.
got it. Um, Talk more about the materials. Is there anything else that we're missing on things that must be included, like a whole slide around AI implementation or the macro perspective? Is there anything else that we're missing on the AGM materials or mistakes that people make in the actual materials that you're being presented with?
I think when you include what you just mentioned with, I think, a healthy level of detail of what's going on at each portfolio company, I think that you've probably summed it up. And I think the AGM is also a very, if you're it's a great place to also announce and or kick off a fundraising process as well, or at least keep your LPs up to date on where you are in that process. But a lot of groups I've seen tend to launch it during their annual meeting, or at least say, hey, if the annual meeting was in October, like, hey, we're going to be coming back to market. We're going to start pre-marketing in December with the data room opening in January, first close targeted for sometime in March. Like, just
Yeah,
foreshadowing that and also using the AGM materials also as collateral for your fundraise is just a smart way to, sort of be, smart with your time and your resources there. But
yeah.
I think that, you know, if you include that in sort of part of like updates to the firm and updates to all of the various funds in the team, I think you've probably got it if you include all of those things.
Okay. On the portfolio deep dives, one page, two, three, four.
I would say you could probably cover it in 3. I mean, I don't know. It just
Okay.
all depends, but it's not so much the number of slides, but the content that you have, right? What does the business do? What were you underwriting at the outset? What did you pay for it from a multiple standpoint? When you bought it, where was revenue? Where was EBITDA? Where was net debt? What's happened? And where are all those metrics today? And like, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And then when are you planning on exiting that business?
Okay. Um, AGM timing and location. Let's maybe start off with location.
Mhm.
Um, at their office, hotel, at a portco. What are kind of general thoughts on likes and dislikes?
So I've seen all of the above. I think that it's the real estate industry is very interesting in that if you go to a real estate annual meeting, you tend to go somewhere where the manager owns properties and you go and look and, touch and feel the properties and go on a property tour. It's not that simple with private equity, right? Like, does someone ever? Not everyone wants to go visit a software business or a staffing business. Like, it's just not as like sexy or as exciting. But I do think that if you've got a portfolio company where you can have your annual meeting, in that same city, and the meeting itself will just be at an event space or a hotel or what have you. But if you can go and tour a portfolio company, if it's going to a manufacturing floor, if it's just going and seeing a site that's going to be developed. I went to a timber annual meeting years and years ago where we got basically dropped off in the middle of rural Alabama and walked around like a timber, kind of a pine forest effectively. So it's I think that giving, I like to say like LPs love a field trip. If you can provide that, that's great. Um, if not, then I think, a typical event space, most GPs at this point, their offices are not going to be big enough to accommodate their LPs. Um, if it is, awesome, that's great. But and I've even seen some include office tours, like, even if you it was not at the office. But I think that, an event space is great. I think a city that is easy for people to get to, there's a lot that end up happening in New York. There's a lot that are happening in Florida these days because I think a lot of GPs have, kinda set up camp down there too. So, I think that the location has to be very easy for your LPs to get to, and if it's not, there's gotta be a really compelling reason for it to be there.
When you go to an annual meeting, aside from, getting the update on the firm, if you're an update on the firm, like what is the other value that you want to get out of that? Like, what does success look like for you when you come out of that AGM?
So I really like being able to, one, spend time with other LPs. LPs love talking to other LPs. We don't do it enough. But with respect to that GP, it's just great to meet other people on the team. So your day to day contact tends to be, someone in IR or maybe one of the partners or maybe both. But it's rare you're going to have the opportunity to have lunch or a drink with like a principal or an operating partner or a strategic advisor. And so I think it's really interesting to get all of those people in the room, and those are the ones who I enjoy talking with and spending time with and coming away just sort of feeling like, all right, I now feel like I've got a better sense for, you know, how this GP is doing what they tell me that they're doing. And if it's from managing their team and sort of the kind of, how, the morale of the mid-level folks to how they work with operating partners and advisors and board members.
Got it.
Would you come
Well,
away like if you talk to like a former CEO who's now in the kind of back on the sort of strategic advisor bench, you've got a great situation when you're talking to that person. They say, "Gosh, yeah, we exited this business, 2 years ago. I came off my non-compete. I just can't wait to do it again. Like, I wanna do it
mm,
again with this GP." Like, that's like a huge, huge vote of confidence that, like, you're not gonna get that through calling up someone and doing a reference call with them, and you may not even know that that person exists or may not even get exposure to them unless you're at the annual meeting.
very interesting. So let's switch over to swag. We'll do a yay, nay, or maybe.
Okay.
Lightning round.
Alright.
Quality coffee mug slash water bottle carrier.
Maybe. That I am somebody I have 2 kids, and we have so many water bottles at our house that, like, we're sort of over capacity for water bottles and coffee mugs. So, like, I would say, generally speaking, if you're kinda stuck on what to do, you can't go wrong with that. Um, but if I end up with that, it's probably gonna go to someone on my team, but, like, a lot of
Yeah.
folks are really psyched to get, like, a high quality water
Hey,
bottle or coffee mug.
spreading the brand however it
Exactly.
can for them.
Yes.
Um, Shirts, vests, or any other type of clothing.
So fit is really hard for that. So just know coming into that, you've got folks who are all the way from a women's extra small to a men's extra large. And so knowing how to accommodate sizing for things like that is tough. It's got to be high quality. It's got to have your branding in a place where no one's like an LP and every LP is not embarrassed to kind of wear it in public. So best places where I've seen brands are on the sleeve or actually like on the back here. So, like my hair covers it, which like some people will get exposure to the brand, but there's a lot of stuff like that that's just going to end up going in a pile and going, to into the donation pile at someone's house. And so if you're giving out clothing, picture yourself walking into your like local Goodwill and seeing your swag sitting there on the, on the rack selling for a couple of bucks. And there's actually GPs out there that I know that don't do clothing for that reason. They're like, I don't want to see it, out there, just in the wild, and not, on our LPs.
There we go. High-end chocolates or consumables.
Um, Huge fan. That's great. They don't. No, I'm serious. They're delicious. They don't create waste. They're easy to throw in your bag to bring home. Like most LPs are just carrying on. No one checks bags anymore. And so you've got to think about the size of what you're giving too. And like hopefully you can just shove it in your carry-on. And then if you're stuck on the plane and you're getting home late, then you can pop a few chocolates and it makes life a little bit better. I
There we
like the
go.
consumables. I'm a big fan of the consumables just because I also just think you're not creating more stuff for people to have to keep up with.
There we go. Uh, what are some other unique types of swag that you like or don't like?
So if you can tie it back to a portfolio company, even better. And I think you can be creative with how you think about that. And so I've been trying to come up with like cool examples. So there was a sponsor who we were invested with, and we, they'd invested in like a bunch of rock quarries, almost like a granite business. And so, like, how do you, and that's, that was one of the many portfolio companies, but they gave away a nice set of coasters in one of the granites from one of the quarries. So, like, you're not going to give somebody a countertop, obviously, but like you can give them like coasters, and like
Yeah.
they were really nice, and they were something, that I still keep on my, desk at home. I think we still have them. So that is really cool. And I think the key is tying it back to your portfolio where you can. So if you're a consumer investor, that's great. Like you can give people whatever the products are, and everyone loves, kind of a nice goodie bag. So, cosmetics, candies, foods, things like that. That's always really cool. Um, it doesn't always work that way in private equity. There's not always like a product that's going to be tied back to what you do, but also think about, your firm and your ethos. And so if there's something that you can sort of like tie it back to a personal connection, then I think that's great. Like 51 labs. Like if you Jordan, if you were to say, "Hey, here's my 51 labs like technical running t-shirt. This is my favorite brand. We had this
Yeah.
made. This is what I train in on the weekends." Like that's cool. Like I will take that,
Yeah.
I will keep it, and I will, run in it or what have you. But I think, you know, no tote bags, no umbrellas, like, like things like that. I just feel like those are a little more generic. I mean, they're not bad, but they're just not that exciting either.
All right. Tote bags, the contentious, one of the most frequently purchased ones. But all right, no tote bags. The only tote bag I like are the ones that are huge that I can take to the grocery store on the weekend or
Yes.
to the beach.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it's too small, I literally throw it away. Even if it's high quality, I'll throw it away.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, like, it's gotta be and everyone has their own criteria for it, right? Like, I'm not gonna take the tote bag to the beach, but, I'll throw it in with my grocery bags. I'll throw it in,
Yeah.
for that kinda stuff, but I think you're you're really rolling the dice on a tote bag, and that it's probably just going to end up in a landfill somewhere, honestly.
How many AGMs does your team go to in a year?
Probably upwards of 40 to 50, if not more.
And how many do you attend in a given year or in a given season?
So there's the fall season and then there's the spring season. I
Yeah.
attend probably anywhere between like 3 and 6 each season.
How can GPs make their portfolio or the overall experience more memorable so that, the second you get on the flight to go back, you don't forget about it?
I mean, I think all the things that we just said, I think the LP has to come away having had an experience that makes that like LPs are taking time away from not only their families and their personal time, but they're also away from their desk and away from their day job when they go. So you have to create a value proposition that says like it is worth it for me to get on a plane, separate myself from my inbox and my family for a day and a half, probably 2 days when you factor in travel. And that to me is unique insights into what's happening in the portfolio, things that I've been told that I couldn't have just read in your quarterly reports, and then getting, like, actual real FaceTime with people that I wouldn't be seeing otherwise.
There we go. All right. That's it.
Alright.
The best practices guide will be out soon. Thank you for doing this. This is great.
You're welcome.
All right. Talk soon. See ya.
Alright. Thanks.